Hail to thee, goodly gentles, 'tis I, Tugg, the malnourished peasant from central Massachusetts. Pray tell, hast thou heard of the Renaissance Fair? Hark, a summer tradition like no other. The Ren Fair pays homage to the golden age of England, a time of technological and artistic innovation, and also a time in history where people would shit in buckets and throw it into the street as if it were some Olympic track and field competition. A cornucopia of both food and flesh awaits you past these castle gates, so come on a trip and make merry. I'm in my apartment. There was no Ren fairs near me, so I have to, you know. Renaissance fairs are like if Monty Python and the Holy Grail had sex with Coachella while an elf and an orc watched. In the words of the Chicago Sun-Times, Ren fairs have a whiff of the occult, a flash of danger, and a hint of the erotic. It's an event where the coolest and weirdest people you'll ever meet come together to celebrate weird old-timey fantasy stuff, I guess. Personally, I'm not sure why they focus so specifically on the Renaissance era so hard. The newborn mortality rate was like 20%. People were throwing shit in the streets as previously mentioned, and you had to give all your stuff to a king whenever he asked for it, and then he'd like bang your wife. So I don't know why people were so into the Renaissance era. But we flock to this LARPer's wet dream every summer to celebrate a bastardization of our poorly recounted history. There are approximately 200 Ren fairs in America alone every year, and that seems like a little bit too much of a good thing to me, but also I'm not an authority on the matter at all, so what do I know? But doth thou wonder how this came to pass? Come, let us find our answers to this question while eating greasy turkey legs and drinking mead and watching someone drinking beer out of a pair of boobs. Along the way, we'll buy leather goods and replica swords and kettle corn, irrefutably the worst kind of popcorn. Together, we'll learn about the history of the Ren Fair and the notably different culture that surrounds it. Hold on to the seams of your poorly made costumes. Today, we're going medieval on the Renaissance Fair. To understand why in 2020 we're partying like it's 1590, first we have to go all the way back to 1950, and I promise this will circle back to big-titted elven women, but you just gotta stick with me for a little bit. Ooh, do you feel that chilly breeze? Well, it's the Cold War. Once again, we went back to the Cold War like 2 episodes ago. How is this becoming a theme on my channel? In the mid-20th century, the Soviet Union wasn't just America's enemy. It became a catch-all boogeyman. Known as the Red Scare, politicians used this hysteria to squash any and all dissent. The House Un-American Activities Committee, super catchy title, investigated all politicians who seemed to have some cahoots with commies, while Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy, notable piece of shit, and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover used their positions to bully and intimidate citizens. People lost their jobs and were even thrown in jail based on hearsay and bad evidence, and it was a weird time in America that we are doomed to repeat within the next 10 years. This era of political bullying was so blatant and pervasive that we gave it a name, which is McCarthyism, and once again, you don't get a whole genre of being a bully named after you unless you're a giant piece of shit. McCarthyism led to blacklists that prevented many politicians, educators, activists, and entertainers from working. In 1950, California took things a step further by passing the Levering Act. This required all state employees to sign an oath of loyalty saying that they'll never be a part of any disruptive politics. Very cool and not North Korean-like of you, America. Big thumbs up from Big Tugg. Also, I imagine making a state employee sign a loyalty oath is the same thing as making a Christian teen wear a purity ring. Someone's secretly getting fucked somewhere. Regardless, many sweater and corduroy pants-loving teachers refused to bend the knee to this sweeping wave of patriot paranoia. And one of these teachers was a little lady called Phyllis Patterson. Not a very important person in terms of notable history, you know, she's just the person who would eventually become the Queen of Ren Fair, pussy, you fucking idiot. An outcast from the teaching world because she wouldn't sign that stupid piece of paper, she ended up working at a youth center in Laurel Canyon in 1960. Laurel Canyon, if you're not familiar, was a massive hippie hangout, basically serving as a refuge for the blacklisted educators and actors of LA. And while working at this youth center, she talked to all these actors and educators who could not get rid of their evil commie ways. And combining Phyllis's love of teaching with the gifts of Hollywood blacklisters, an Elizabethan county fair was staged in 1963, which technically was the first Ren Fair. So we made it all the way from the Cold War to elf boobs. We did it as a unit. I'm proud of us. The fair was an immediate success, and it grew along with the burgeoning counterculture that was happening in California at the time. Even America's first underground newspaper, the Los Angeles Free Press, was first handed out at this fair, and it was called the Fair Free Press. So this was also like weirdly important in terms of journalism. Like the counterculture the LA Free Press was often covering, these pleasure fairs were a beacon for alternative lifestyles. They attracted musicians, students, hippies, artists, dudes who loved shoving swords down their throats. And this attention made the fair steadily grow through size and attendance throughout all of the 60s. By the 70s, Minnesota, Texas, and Maryland all had Ren fairs of their own, and things were looking good. But just like how the hippie movement was eventually taken over by capitalism, was commodified to be sold back to deadheads nowadays, Ren fairs were also eventually overtaken by capitalism. I know, I know. It happens, it literally happens every single time. I don't know what to tell you. So it is a little bittersweet because the original vibes of the Ren Fair that were about teaching and free love and weird hippie shit are long gone. But now Ren Fairs are spread across the entire United States because they're profitable, and that vibe of being a weird hippie freak while wearing a silly outfit is still there. It's still pretty strong. Well, now that they have become a well-oiled, homogenized version of what their hippie roots started as, Ren Fairs are still pretty damn freaky and horny and dangerous, kinda. There really should be restrictions on what kind of swords you can sell, and you can say there's restrictions, but people are doing a lot of shit under the table. Despite Ren Fairs being marketed as family-friendly events, the hippie free love movement can still be seen in every corset, kilt, and codpiece. You ever wanted to see a guy only wearing a kilt fall into a bonfire while someone's playing Wonderwall on a lute? Well, you can do that. You can do that by going to a Ren Fair. So first, let's talk about the costumes. One of the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a Ren Fair. Move over, Civil War reenactors. We got a whole brand new kind of dork that likes to overdress in a 100-degree field. And yeah, I mean, sure, Civil War reenactors are dedicated, but where's the sex appeal? I've never seen a Confederate soldier show a little thigh. That being said, medieval thirst traps are a subgenre of visual stimulant that is confusingly hot. It makes my brain get kind of confused. It's reminiscent of like Lady Cluck in Robin Hood. Like, why did they give the chicken big tits? What did that serve the plot, you know? These Ren Fairs are full of these walking enigmas of clashing mentalities. You got women walking around with their bosoms heaving out of burlap vests. You got men leaving their tunic ties open so you can see how their chest hair connects to their neck beard. You got the gals who go with era-specific clothing and yet still somehow make it work in a fantastic way. And then you have the gals who dress up like horny wood nymphs, which equally work for me. I'm not gonna complain. You have the guys who appear to be dressed as some dude in a fantasy smut novel, or at least they're trying to look like that. And then you have the fellows who paint themselves entirely green and won't respond to anyone unless they address them as Gorlak the Greedy. Everyone is glistening because they're sweaty in the sun, and also all the grease that poured over them while they ate those greasy turkey legs. And after a day full of nerdy sexual tension, good luck keeping that sword sheathed that night. Because let me tell you, a Ren Fair turns into a Baldur's Gate 3 cutscene when the night comes. When the lights go down, shit gets real. Honestly, let's talk about the sex. Let's talk about the sex that happens at Ren Fairs, because it happens a lot, and it's not advertised, but it's a big part of it. The lords and ladies are getting randy at the Ren Fairs, y'all. Let me tell you how I know this from a journalistic point of view. Not because I've been a part of it. That must smell so bad, but let me just tell you what I've found. So we have Ren Fair employees, okay? They're known as Rennies, and they travel around the country doing their jobs at several different Ren Fairs. Which makes sense. If you learn how to swallow fire, you're not just gonna do that like for your husband. You're gonna travel, you're gonna make money. It's a money-making hobby. And because these interesting people with unique talents travel around the country, they end up being like a weird version of rock stars, performing, partying, doing some naughty shit, and then hitting the highway onto their next adventure. And while there might be some light flirting during the day with patrons during things like the cleavage competition, which is a real thing, you need to go to a Ren Fair. The real party starts in the campgrounds after hours. When the lights go down, this shit becomes like a D&D fan fiction to the grossest of degrees. Take the Texas Renaissance Festival parties as an example. These sexually driven escapades come courtesy of clans that are not technically affiliated with the festival. However, they do diligently show up every year to stake their claim in the fairground. They have names like, and I'm not kidding, Call of Booty and Nottingham. How any of these people get laid is beyond me. And they've been known to play games such as Naked Jenga, which sounds like a sweaty mess, but I'm sure someone gets a boner. And sometimes they even dabble in BDSM activities like public flogging in front of everybody. In fact, Ren Fair and BDSM communities have a weird amount of overlap. Some fairs have secret bondage camps that exist on the outskirts of the fair themselves. One popular fetish site has a forum called Renaissance Fair Kinksters with 5,321 members. And now I'm on a list for looking that up. I mean, I guess once you take into account all the corsets and leather goods you see throughout the day, the idea that someone somewhere in the camp is getting publicly paddled is inevitable. And I do want to remind you that this does all take place in a field, a dirty field. All of this is happening in where ticks live, so just get that visual scrubbed into your brain real quick. And sometimes this horny Ren Fair shit gets completely out of hand. Take this account of a 2001 Ren Fair bonfire sex fest from Reddit user RobFix. I am next accosted by a woman wearing only chainmail. She claws at my sword, her icy fingers touching my face, and grip my hair like the vice of death. Her chainmail-laden breast grate upon my armor as she presses herself into the warm confines of my cloak. Without a word, she is on me, her breath hot and her tongue a foreign invader as she strikes at my mouth and fumbles at the dagger God himself had blessed me with. Good God. The effects of her spell registering my eyes, and she moves from me like a shadow to the next man of arms and armor. So that lady's getting passed around. The nerds have found a way to have group sex in like very cool ways, And I feel like we have to applaud them for that. This is exactly what they wanted their whole lives, and they found a way to do it. So I might as well also discuss the Texas Renaissance Festival, because we brought that up earlier, talking about the sex people have there. Many of the kinkiest rumors surround the Texas Renaissance Festival, and it makes sense because it is the largest Renaissance fair in the entire country. It employs over 500 costume actors on 25 stages and draws over 500,000 dorks, dweebs, and sexual maniacs every year. The fair was started by George Collum, who bought an abandoned strip mine in Grimes County in 1974, and eventually, as the Texas Renaissance Festival grew, enough performers would move onto the land itself because they wouldn't have to move around that much, which means that Grimes County, Texas, which was a dead mining community, was suddenly reincorporated. And guess who became the mayor of that town? That's right, George Collum. He's the leader of the Renaissance Fair in the town and also the town itself, which means, and although there are laws in place to make sure this doesn't happen, George is the closest thing we'll come to having a king in America. He's the closest thing to a monarchy we will ever have. Now, you'd think that King Collum, because he runs a Renaissance festival, would be chill and cool and things like that. Turns out no. Turns out he's not a good person at all. In fact, he's been accused of both sexual harassment and discrimination. Now, both of those things are genuine issues that I think we should take seriously, but that's also things kings would do and get away with. So, he's living the part, not in a great way though. And also, there was a 2024 documentary series called Ren Fair, which chronicled the situation of Collum trying to sell the Renaissance Festival to someone else who would buy it because he wanted to have enough money for his gold-dicking whore wife, which is just a bummer to watch. But to really sum up the life of the only king in America, look no further than the personal bio on his webpage, where he calls himself a healthy, 86-year-old, sexually active, Caucasian male entrepreneur. One at a time, my ladies, lest you trip into the bonfire. So while it is an open secret that Ren fairs are full of horny dragon lovers, in reality, the prevailing morality of the Elizabethan era was very buttoned up. I mean, first of all, the bubonic plague was not inspiring boners or ill-fitting linens. During that time period, people were having semi-clothed, guilt-ridden missionary relations like God intended. Historical inaccuracy is actually the most common thread that connects most Ren fairs in America. Part of the inaccuracy comes from the people who show up because everyone decides what they're going to wear, and there's no real consensus on the matter, and that ends up there's a clash of identities. Listen, I'm not gonna nitpick and say they're using the wrong fabrics or sewing patterns as they did in the Elizabethan era. And honestly, I don't even care what most people wear to these things. It's fun, have fun. But goddamn it, I'm a stickler when it comes to themes. I'm a theme Nazi. I don't take that out of context. They're just not sticking to the correct time period. The time period was the 16th century, right? Let's take a look at some examples. Vikings, that's the 9th century. You're way out of whack. Robin Hood, that's the 14th century. Well, you're getting closer, but you're still off by 200 years. Star Trek. What the fuck you doing? That's like the 23rd century. Mermaids, fake. Fairies, fake. Centaurs, the science is still out, but it is not looking good. The food is also less of a history lesson and more of a, hey, this is America. You're gonna get as many calories as possible in one meal. Of course, getting chow mein from ye olde China Dragon is not historically accurate, but it's the innocuous staples of Ren Fair foods that are the biggest offenders when it comes to historical accuracy. While it's true that kettle corn was an English invention, it didn't come around until the 18th century. That doesn't stop the Texas Renaissance Festival by selling it by the truckload, which makes no sense to me. I fucking hate kettle corn. My roommate used to buy microwave popcorn, and Kai Connor, I'm talking about you, and he would leave it in the cupboard forever, and he would never eat it, and sometimes I would want popcorn, and sometimes I'd be feeling to steal it, but he wouldn't get the buttered kind, he'd get kettle corn, and they look exactly the same, and I'd make it, and I'd taste it, and I'd be like, oh great, it's just hot cereal. It's just like a fucking bowl of hot corn pops. Kettle corn fucking sucks. However, despite everything I just said, fairgoers love it, and the festival itself has rebranded it as Kettle Crack. And I hate to be that woke guy, but making crack jokes in 2024 it doesn't seem kosher to me. Like, imagine if we called the kettle corn Popsy Cotton, you know? Everyone knows someone who's going through opiate shit, so maybe not make the crack joke. And the turkey legs. The turkey legs are even a bigger lie. They've been a staple of Ren fairs since the beginning. They even inspired those big-ass turkey legs you can get at Disney World. Disney didn't start selling those until 1989 because people fucked with them at Ren Fair. There's no official combined count for all Ren Fair turkey legs, but with over 200 fairs and tens of thousands of these things being sold at every festival, the number is obviously in the millions by now. And it's all one big lie. Turkeys are not even indigenous to England. The turkey came from America. No one has eaten turkey legs during the Renaissance period or any time before that. Which makes sense now that I think about it, because sometimes I'd literally be late to high school because a band of turkeys would attack my car and try and rip off my license plate like a pack of wild dogs. To put it mildly, the Ren fairs are stretching the limits of what we understand as the Renaissance time period. Let's be honest, at this point, it's basically justification to walk around a field with a sword and pointy ears. And I'm all for that. I know I just bitched and moaned about it for about 5 minutes straight, but I love all of this stuff, except the kettle corn. Fuck the kettle corn. I just think for the sake of history and the sake of theming, we need to rename the entire event. Maybe something like a pleasure festival. You know what? No, that makes it sound hornier than it already is. Or how about Fantasy Fest? No, god damn it, that's equally, if not more horny. Well, whatever we name it, it'll be better suited to the patchwork quilt of an event that these things actually turn out to be. I was looking around and a lot of these fairs even encourage the period time confusion with events like pirate-themed nights, Viking raids, and the steampunk weekends. They do steampunk. And it doesn't matter at all, once again, unless you're tight-assed like me. The fair is just no longer about education like Phyllis wanted it to be. But at the same time, even when it started, the Ren Fair was always relaxed in its representation of the era. It's not supposed to be a reenactment. It's supposed to be a participation thing. Everyone's supposed to have fun. It's just that letting everyone be involved muddies the water. Same thing with voting. I'm not going to say that some people shouldn't be allowed to vote, but we all know somebody who should, you know, definitely not be allowed to vote. So when it comes to the debate of fact versus fun, I'm all on the side of fun. I'm all for the elf shit. I just think we have to be a little bit careful about the names is all. Because someone is going to show up with their family to see a loot performance and buy some jewelry, and they're going to see an orc penis. That's not fair to them. New videos every Saturday and Wednesday sometimes. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Have sex with a gnome. Thank you so much.